Chapter 13, Carnivore Canyon. No one tried to kill me during the night, and the next day passed uneventfully. I stayed with Mom at work, although this time it was a bit more fun. I think she still felt guilty about not taking my claim that Henry had been murdered more seriously, because she let me go into the gorilla exhibit with her, which violated about 43 Fun Jungle rules and directives. I didn't go out where any of the tourists could see me, but it was still awfully cool. I hadn't been so close to gorillas since Africa. Kawami, the 2-year-old, came right over to play with me. Still, that was only about 15 minutes of what proved to be a very long day. I couldn't wait for the party, not only because it meant I'd get to see Summer again, but because I was going nuts cooped up in Monkey Mountain, waiting for Buck Grassley to do all the investigating. Every time the phone rang, I'd tense up in anticipation, hoping it was Buck calling to report that he'd solved the case. Maybe he'd gone through Charlie Connor's locker and found some jackets in a metal file. Or he'd confronted Pete Thwacker, and Pete had cracked like an egg and confessed to everything. But the call never came, though. We didn't hear a thing from Buck all day, or from Summer for that matter. I texted her a few times to see if she'd heard anything, but all I got was a quick blurb: meet me at the check-in desk at 7. And that was it. After a while, I decided not to reach out anymore, or I'd start to look pathetic. It was a slow day at the park as well, easily the slowest since the opening. Few people wanted to come pay full price to visit the park without Carnivore Canyon when the exhibit was going to be open the very next day. Plus, the park shut down an hour early to prep for the big party. Mom and I headed home at 6 to shower and put on our best clothes, which wasn't saying much. Mom had never had a reason to own a fancy dress, or even a place to hang one. Besides, she'd always felt it was a travesty to spend hundreds of dollars on clothes she was only going to wear once or twice, when the durable ones she wore every day cost a fraction of that. With all the money people spend on fashion every year, she said, we could cure every disease in Africa. She had just put on clean slacks, a nice blouse, and a little perfume. All I had to wear was a collared polo and my one pair of pants without a tear in the knees. Not surprisingly, most of the other party guests had very different ideas about fashion. I've never been to a big fancy event before. Fun Jungle's grand opening had been far more family-friendly and casual. It had never occurred to me that women ever wear diamonds to the zoo, or ball gowns, or even high-heeled shoes, but they were. The party attracted wealthy people from all over Texas. Even though Texas was a big state and it could be hours between cities, Texans still loved to drive. I'd heard of people driving from San Antonio to Houston just for dinner, and that was almost 4 hours each way. So it was no big deal for people to head in from every corner of the state for one of the biggest social events of the year. And then to top that, there were people who'd flown in by private jet from other parts of the country. All in all, over 2,000 people were coming. There was already a long line to pass through the metal detectors into the party when Mom and I arrived. Everyone was grousing about the extra security. They'd already passed through detectors at the front gates before being shuttled to Carnivore Canyon in golf carts. But I was pleased to see it. I felt safe for the first time in days. Carnivore Canyon itself was too small to hold all of those people, so the party took place on a wide lawn in front of the exhibit. J.J. McCracken had spared no expense. There were dozens of buffet tables piled with food, as well as several entire sides of beef roasting on spits. Fans had been set up to blow the smell of meat away from the Carnivore Canyon so it wouldn't drive the animals crazy with hunger. There was a big dance floor, which was completely empty, and an outdoor bar, which was packed. There were string lights and disco balls and ice sculptures that had probably been lions and tigers at one point, but they had already melted beyond recognition in the heat. The press was out in force. I recognized several local reporters working at the party. Camera flashes were popping everywhere, and that was merely the press J.J. McCracken had allowed in. I heard several people say the paparazzi were piled four deep outside the front gates. Mom and I had little interest in the party itself. Instead, we made a beeline for Carnivore Canyon. All the hard work on the exhibit had paid off. It really looked like a natural canyon carved by centuries of water running through rock, rather than something that had been built by men over a few months. An elevated walkway ran through most of it, letting you observe the animals from above or see eye to eye with the mountain lions as they perched on rock ledges, or leopards nestled in the branches of the trees. For the most part, there were no barrier between us and the animals. It felt like we were in their world rather than the other way around, although there were a few points where very fine wire mesh was strung so thin you could barely see it. Surprisingly, there weren't many guests in the exhibit. Most had only come for the party. But the few who had ventured beyond the buffet tables paid little attention to the animals. Instead, they clustered in the walkways, sipping champagne and socializing. While I found their disinterest annoying, it was also to my advantage. Mom and I had much of Carnivore Canyon to ourselves. There were no crowds to shove through, no pedestrian traffic jams. The guests might have been ignoring the animals, but that was better than throwing food at them. As it was close to sunset, the animals were at their most active, having spent the day sleeping. They eagerly explored their new habitats, bounding through rocks and splashing in their pools. 3 young mountain lions wrestled comically. Otters slid down a slope into their pond, and a grizzly bear the size of a car paced on a ledge a few feet away from us. I was so captivated, I forgot about Summer. It wasn't until my phone rang at 10 minutes after 7 that I realized what time it was. "Where are you?" Summer snapped when I answered. "By the leopards," I told her. "Sorry, I'll come right out." "No, stay there," Summer said. "Where you are is better." I wasn't quite sure what she meant by that, but she hung up before I could ask. I got my answer soon enough, though. Summer got to the leopards quickly, bearing 2 skewers of chicken satay and a Diet Coke, her bodyguards in tow. She was wearing a pink dress and pink high heels. Her hair had been done. It looked like enough aerosol hairspray to rip a hole in the ozone layer had been deployed. I was now so used to seeing her dressed down, it took me a moment to recognize her. We were a good way into the canyon, so only guests who truly cared about seeing the animals had ventured that far. There were only a few people about. They all recognized Summer as she passed, but had the good manners not to pester her for autographs. I noticed they all kept an eye on her, however, and then stared at Mom and me curiously when Summer began talking to us, wondering who we were and how on earth we rated highly enough to earn her attention. "Yeah," Summer said. "It's way better back here. Did you see all the paparazzi out front?" "Nope," I replied. For some reason, they didn't seem that interested in us. Summer laughed, then turned to Mom. "You must be Mrs. Fitzroy." Mom smiled. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Summer. Theodore's told me a great deal about you. I'm not sure why, but it made me blush a bit." Summer and Mom talked a bit about Mom's research and life in the Congo before I finally got the chance to ask, "Where's your dad? I thought he was coming." "He's right over there," Summer pointed with the chicken skewer. To my surprise, J.J. McCracken was already on the walkway 2 exhibits farther down. He was talking to Doc. "How'd he get past us?" Mom asked a second before I could say the same thing. "We've been here all along." "He came in the back way, through the keeper's entrance to the exhibit." Summer explains, "Daddy hates fancy events like this. He doesn't like crowds. But he always seems so happy at them," Mom said. "He fakes so well. All part of the business," he says. "If Daddy had it his way, the only way he'd socialize would be playing poker at the house. So he always slips in without anybody noticing if he can. That's why I said to stay back here. He wanted to meet Teddy where no one would see him." I coughed, surprised. "Your father wants to meet me?" "Yeah, come on. He doesn't have much time." Summer quickly led us down the walkway. "The ribbon-cutting ceremony soon." The sun had now set, and the stars were coming out above. Lights had come on in the exhibits to allow everyone to see the animals, but the walkway was getting dimmer by the second. J.J. McCracken was just a silhouette as we approached. It wasn't surprising that we hadn't noticed him, despite being close. Even though I'd seen thousands of pictures of him, maybe more, J.J. McCracken turned out to be an easy man to overlook. He was much smaller than I'd been led to believe, not much taller than his own daughter, and surprisingly slight of build. He had very plain features that seemed mismatched on his face. J.J. made no secret of the fact that he wasn't attractive, often remarking that he was about as handsome as a toad in a suit, and claiming that Summer obviously got her good looks from her mother, who was a famous fashion model. Summer's mother always said that she'd been attracted to her husband's inner beauty, but most people figured his massive bank account had probably been pretty attractive too. JJ was wearing a tuxedo, but he looked uncomfortable in it, constantly tugging at his tie and shifting about like he had ants crawling all over him. As small as JJ was, he had the personality of a man several times larger. I could sense it as we approached. He didn't notice us right away, as he was deep in conversation with Doc and staring down into the exhibit below. I looked where he was. To my surprise, there were 3 jaguars down by a fake stream. I guess they'd arrived at Fun Jungle without anyone knowing. So what happened to it? JJ was asking. Toxoplasmosis, Doc said. It's primarily a disease of house cats, although wild cats can get it. Human infants if they have pet cats. So it wouldn't have picked it up in the wild? No, it probably got stuck en route here. Maybe even in the quarantine. Sometimes these idiots from customs don't take the right precautions and just lump all the cats together when they come into the country. I realized that they were talking about the dead jaguar. It must have come from outside the U.S. if the customs had quarantined it. Customs had a few big animal holding facilities on the borders and held every animal coming into America. It would be a wild animal destined for a zoo, a farm animal destined for the market, or even a family pet. Unfortunately, the facilities were underfunded and run down, and the animal care was known to be a subpar at best. It wouldn't have been the first time the zoo lost an endangered animal while trying to bring it into the country. We have any proof of that? JJ asked, annoyed. Because if we do, maybe we can get some kind of waiver, get customs to let us do our own quarantining from now on. The government won't let you do that. Oh, they might. I've got friends in high places, you know. We were close enough now to see the frown on Doc's face. It's not just customs at fault here. God knows why Martin insisted on bringing these animals all the way from the Amazon. There are a dozen facilities in this country where we could have got some. 6 months from now, I'm the one who kicked Martin's butt on this, so if anyone's got a bone to pick, it's with me. Carnivore Canyon's opening tomorrow. We're supposed to have a jaguar exhibit with no jaguars. No one would have noticed. You've got lions and tigers. That's all the public cares about. Doc waved toward the tiger exhibit, which was not far down the walkway, then pointed back at the jaguars below. These animals were brought from a shady breeding facility in Brazil and rushed up here. There's a good chance that they could all have health problems. They look fine to me. That farm's breeding records were a mess. For all we know, these jaguars could be inbred worse than the royal family. Doc was about to go on, but JJ had noticed us and held up a hand to silence him. Can we talk more about this later? He said. Go enjoy yourself. It's a party. Doc turned and saw us. I think he was torn between frowning at me and smiling at my mother. Summer's presence put the smile over the top. Evening, ladies, Doc said, graciously. Then he left us alone. I noticed he didn't hurry out of the exhibit, though. He seemed as disdainful of the party as JJ, and only wandered a little farther down the walkway before stopping to watch some ocelots. JJ was far more friendly to us, instantly turning up the charm. There's my princess, he said, giving Summer a big hug that embraced her greatly. Then he turned to my mom and extended a hand. Charlene, always a pleasure. Likewise, JJ. Mom took JJ's hand. The exhibit looks wonderful. Doesn't it, though? I think the designers have truly outdone themselves on this one. JJ gallantly kissed Mom's hand and set his sights on me. And you must be the famous Theodore Roosevelt Fitzroy. These 2 ladies have a heap of good things to say about you. Somehow that single statement made both Summer and me blush. It's very nice to meet you, sir, I said, extending my hand. JJ pumped my arm with surprising strength given his scrawny build. No, the pleasure is all mine. I hear you and my daughter have been having quite a lot of adventures at this park. That makes two of us, Mom said. We heard you and Doc talking about the jaguars, Summer said. Are they really inbred? JJ studied his daughter for a moment as though he didn't know whether to be pleased by her forwardness or annoyed by it. I doubt it. I don't think these breeding facilities are nearly as poorly run as Doc suspects. But what if they are? Will they have babies with 3 heads and stuff? No, that's a moot point, because if our genetic test indicates they're inbred, then we won't let them breed. Period. Of course, that's all small potatoes compared to the problems you believe this park has, Theodore. JJ suddenly swung toward me. Summer has recounted the tale of your investigation with great enthusiasm. Obviously, the idea that Henry was murdered greatly concerns me. I know he wasn't exactly Prince Charming, but for someone to kill him at my very own zoo, no less. Well, it makes me mad as a cut snake. Then perhaps you should influence to get the local police involved, Mom said. Oh, I don't think there's any need for that. Our security team is fully capable of getting to the bottom of this, as well as making sure the story doesn't leak to the press, Mom added. JJ gave her a friendly smile, but there seemed to be a little fire behind it. I don't think he was used to people standing up to him like that. Well, yes, maybe that seems ornery or blinkered to you, but imagine what a field day the press would have if they found out Henry was murdered. It'd be front page news all over the world. Children would be devastated. If we looked like we were running a second-hand outfit here, which might be exactly what the killer wants. Why? I asked. JJ looked around cautiously, assessing how close the other guests were before answering. There was a small cluster of people nearby, so JJ led us down toward the tigers. A man-made waterfall thundered into the canyon there, loud enough to drown out most of the noise. Below us, 4 tigers slunk through the grass at the bottom of the exhibit, waiting for their dinner. Carnivore Canyon was pioneering some new ground in keeping their animals mentally stimulated. In the past, zoos had simply thrown meat to their tigers, but after a generation or two, the cats would have no hunting instincts left, so the zoo had begun to make the delivery of foods less predictable, forcing the animals to work to find it by leaving them in different places every day and at different times. Now Fun Jungle had gone a step further, creating a virtual hunt. Before food was delivered, the scents and sounds of various prey would be pumped into the exhibit via a series of tubes and speakers, leading the tigers on an ever-changing route through their exhibit before food was provided. It sounded a little corny to me, but it seemed to be working. The tigers below us were definitely exhibiting stalking behavior and seemed primed for attack. They were so impressive, even JJ McCracken was a bit distracted by them. He needed a gentle nudge from Summer to remember where he was. Dad, the killers? Oh, yes, JJ said. When I first heard about the murders, I had a hunch who it might be. Now, I've had Buck and the security staff work on this case round the clock over the last 2 days, and what they found has confirmed my fears. It's quite likely that Henry was murdered by saboteurs. Mom, Summer, and I were all surprised by this. Mom was the first to speak. Who? There's 2 possibilities. One is the Animal Liberation Front. Summer gasped sharply. Why would animal rights activists kill an animal? To make us look bad. The ALF has been against this park since the moment it was announced. To them, we're just a prison for animals. They ignore all the work we've done to create a state-of-the-art habitats, all the excitement we create in young people, all the money we generate for research and conservation projects. I even invited representatives from the ALF to tour Fun Jungle with me to see everything we do to enhance the quality of life for our animals. But of course they refused. These people don't want to listen to reason. They think they're right and we're wrong, and they won't be happy until they shut down every zoo, farm, and pet store in the USA. They're not sensible like the Syria Club or the ASPCA. They're a dangerous group of radicals. In fact, technically, they're terrorists since they destroyed private property. They blew up a meat packing plant last year in Nebraska. I was surprised to hear this last fact. So was Summer. Mom appeared to have known about it. But the ALF was trying to make a statement against Fun Jungle. Wouldn't it be more in line with their morals to attack a building rather than the animal? She asked. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But consider Henry. He's not just an animal. He's a symbol. He's our mascot. The most famous animal in the world. Do you have any idea how much damage they've done by killing Henry right after the park's grand opening? Millions of dollars, maybe more. We've had thousands of families cancel their visits. I've got warehouses full of Henry merchandise I can't sell now. And our stock price took a nosedive. Blowing up a building wouldn't have been an impact like that. Plus, it would have been an obvious terrorist attack. The public would have instantly turned against them. But you can imagine anything more horrible than blowing up a zoo? No. But look at how Henry was killed. Subtly. Quietly. Most vets wouldn't have even noticed it was a murder. Only someone as meticulous as Doc. The death makes it look like we dropped the ball. Gives us a black eye. Here we are, claiming to be the greatest zoo in the world with the highest quality animal care, and we can't even keep our own mascot alive. So why can't you just say Henry was killed? Summer wanted to know. That'd make whoever did it look bad, wouldn't it? Maybe, if we knew who done it. But we don't. Yet. So right now, all we can do is go public and say that someone killed Henry. We can't prove it was the ALF yet. Maybe it was just some lone jerk who hated hippos. It was still a black eye for us. We made Henry famous and then failed to protect him. Plus, the whole event goes from being a natural occurrence in nature, old hippos die, to a sordid tabloid story, Henry Hippo murdered. But you said Buck had found some evidence that it was the ALF, I reminded him. No. He found evidence that it was sabotage. We don't know who's behind it yet. Buck's leaning toward the ALF, but there's also a chance that it's corporate warfare. You mean another corporation killed Henry? Mom asked. Exactly. Do you know what a dent Fun Jungle has put in the business of other theme parks in this country? We've sucked away thousands of guests from them, millions of dollars in profit. They're not happy about it. Still, Mom said incredulously, you don't honestly think a corporation would murder your mascot? JJ shrugged. Why not? Technically, it's not even murder. Henry's an animal. Legally, it's only destruction of property. And I know that's fair game in the corporate world. Again, look at the economics damage they've done. They couldn't have hit us any harder. The buildings might have cost a lot, but they're insured. But Henry, say what you will about the bucket of lard, but he was Fun Jungle to most people. The damage to our image, to our brand, has been irrevocable. It's as though I went down to Disneyland and assassinated Mickey Mouse. I was taken aback by all of this. It sounded crazy to me, which was compounded by the fact that JJ, lit by the floodlights from the tiger exhibits below, looked a little maniacal as he spoke. But even more shocking was the fact that it kind of made sense. After all, humans had a history of behaving badly in order to make a buck. If a man would kill a rhinoceros for the thousands of dollars its horn would bring him, what would stop a corporation from killing a hippopotamus when billions were at stake? Somewhere close to us, I heard the clank of metal banging on metal. The walkway trembled slightly, and the tigers began to growl. It sounded as though the hunt was picking up. What was the evidence Buck found? I asked. JJ smiled at me, as though pleased. I thought you might ask that. Unfortunately, I can't tell you for fear of jeopardizing the investigation. I frowned, and Summer started to complain, but JJ cut her off and spoke to me. I know it's not cool. After all, there wouldn't be an investigation if not for you, Theodore. And for that, I'm greatly indebted. That's why I wanted this time with you, so I could talk to you man to man and express my gratitude in person. You're a good kid. You're smart and you've got guts. And I know you're not going to like leaving this case to someone else, but I also know that you understand why it has to be that way. Buck has this under control. He'll find whoever killed Henry. He just needs some time to do it. So all I can ask of you in the meantime is patience. Sit back and trust Buck can do his job. Can you do that for me? I had to admit, JJ understood me awfully well. He grasped exactly what I was going through. I wasn't happy to step aside, but I appreciated JJ taking the time to explain everything to me like I was a grown-up. I could see why he was such a good deal maker. It was hard not to like him. Yes, I said, I can do that. Like I said, smart. JJ patted me on the shoulder happily. Now don't think you're totally out of the loop, son. If you have any more thoughts on this case, you let me know. Call my office and I'll be with you as fast as I can. But as far as the investigation's concerned, I need you on the sidelines. It's beginning to look like there's some real dirty people involved here. It could get dangerous. There was a soft thump on the walkway not far behind me. It just did, Mom said. She was looking past us, fear in her eyes. Beside her, Summer had the exact same look. There was a low, guttural growl from behind me. I spun around. A pair of bright orange eyes leered at me from down the walkway. One of the tigers was out, and it was still on the hunt.